All right. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Leslie Blevins with Enilda Clinic, and today I'm here with Registered Dietitian and Nutritionist Miss Michelle Winebender. All right. I'm super excited to have her here as part of our expert chat series. We're going to be chatting today about teaching your child to eat a healthy diet. I know this is a very common set of questions that come to me as a psychologist, and it's hard for me to always answer all the questions that parents bring to me because it's outside of my specialty to really go into a healthy diet or what specific foods to give to your child. I can talk about the behavior things like sitting at the table, preventing whining, things like that. But I always want to consult with a dietitian whenever it comes to the actual foods being eaten and how much they should eat and things like that. And so, Michelle, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited to hear about the other things like the behaviors at the table because I never know what to say about that. So this is going to be a good combination of minds.
Yeah, right? Yeah, we're just going to have a nice little chat about this. And hi, everyone. I just want to interrupt real quick and ask you to subscribe to our learning newsletter. You can do so at enildaclinic.com, right on the right side where you're watching this video, or at YouTube by hitting the subscribe button. And I'm just super excited. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your world of dietitian work and all that?
Yeah. So I'm Michelle Winebender. I'm a dietitian. I have my own practice in Spokane, Washington, and I've been doing that for 2.5 years. The population I treat mostly are clients who've been diagnosed with eating disorders or disordered eating. So I work a lot with therapists and doctors kind of in conjunction with therapy for best practice. My population tends to be, I have a lot of like high school, college age people, and then I have a lot of like middle-aged people who are just tired of dieting and or yo-yo dieting and not feeling great about what they're doing with their food and their body, and they're ready to try something else. So I like to have those conversations and see people venture into just a better relationship with food. But a lot of it, we end up talking about what food was like for them growing up or as a child. Or I actually spoke with a therapist earlier today, and she used the term their family of origin, food behaviors and expectations and things like that. So it's important to, think about how we talk to kids about food today and how that might affect them as adults.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of habits and a lot of domains of life get set up in childhood. And what I've really been learning, because my childhood life, just the things that were expected, it's changed so dramatically in my adult life. And so just expectations I have for myself, like my eating patterns are dramatically different from my family of origin. I'm a business owner, but people in my family are employees. And so like that's very, very different. And I live in Washington and everybody else lives in Alabama. And it's just so different. And so there's mindsets that you grow up expecting to follow and you don't even question it. You don't even realize it's there. And as an adult, you're just doing it over and over and over again until maybe you get to my age and you realize, oh, maybe I don't feel my best or something, and I want to change that. And so today, let's focus on the eating. Let's focus on that. I'm so excited the eating habits we develop in childhood and how to make them super healthy for our kids. So let's dive in. Let's pretend I'm a parent. And I call you up, we're sitting there for an intake appointment, and I'm like, I want to be preventive with my little toddler, my little Billy, and I really want him to have super healthy eating habits. And what are you going to tell me?
Yes. I love it when people come to me with those questions, like just being open-minded and how can I do this? Because I think a lot of times we think, well, I eat, therefore I should know, or I should know how to feed my children. And honestly, like, I do rely on parents a lot for that. You know, if we're treating a child that has some disordered eating, like, I honor that they do know how to feed their children. So with that, then I think it's important to just, like, if you're just thinking about the food you're going to prepare or have in your house for your family, I think it's important to really kind of step back and think about a neutral approach to food. So less of those food judgments about this is a good food and this is a bad food, or this food's good for you, this food's bad for you. So just try to step back, think of a variety of foods that you can have in your house, that you eat, that you offer to your family, without labeling them one or the other. Because kids pick up on that. I assume their minds work pretty literally and pretty black and white. And so they start to think, oh, this is good for me, this is bad for me. And you still can have a lot of influence on what those foods are and what's offered at meals and what they select for snacks, but without labeling them so they carry that with them. That's a lot of what I work on with adults is, they feel like they're a better person if they eat good food, and they feel like a not so great person if they eat bad food. And it just doesn't really work that way. Our body's going to use energy from whatever form we give it. And so having less of that judgment around it really just helps you be more intuitive as to what you need. Just like what you said, like, maybe I feel better when I eat food in this way, or I choose these types of food. So you start to notice intuitively how you feel.
I love that, because if we relate that over to therapy world, we understand, like in acceptance and commitment therapy, that we're creating our reality from the thoughts that we're telling ourselves. And so I talk a lot about this in parent-child interaction therapy, that the parent can help their child to create their reality by reflecting thoughts onto what the child is saying and describing the child's behavior. And so being very intentional and aware of those thoughts you're reflecting onto your child is so important, so that you're helping them to have healthy functioning. And maybe, I work with children who might be a little bit off developmentally as far as health is going. And so we're usually doing correction in that regard. But even if, there is no correction needed, you're just wanting to promote health in what you're saying to your kid. And so, I love that what you're saying there, because what you say to yourself about what you're doing could be creating unneeded distress or anxiety or depression, and it's not necessarily needed.
Exactly. Yeah. When it's just food, kind of just thinking like it's just food. Yes, there is always a choice to make, but really it's just food. And so, thinking about how would you think of yourself feeding yourself and fueling your body. So you might have picked up that, oh, I tend to concentrate better in the morning if I've had breakfast, or if I have a snack available so I'm not so hungry when mealtime rolls around. I can approach that meal a little differently. I maybe doesn't feel so chaotic, or I don't feel so drawn to food. I think kids can really relate to, this is going to give you energy. This helps you think. We know eating breakfast helps kids perform better in school, and it's just that glucose going to their brain. And so even relating it to you feel better, or I know it's hard to make a decision when you're hungry, or I think we could maybe focus on the game better if we had a snack and we could think clearer. So more that relation to how it feels physically versus just that's not good for you, or you need to eat this food.
Yeah. And I really, something I'm realizing too as you're talking is that I think paying attention to the physical sensations, that's something that we do over in the therapy world as well, because so many people learn to tune out what's actually happening in the moment in their body. That's the first step in understanding your emotions. And so with food, if we're learning to tune out our physical experience, it would be hard to know how a food is either nourishing us or completely not nourishing us and maybe even making us feel drowsy or lethargic or whatever. And having that language and teaching your kid to pay attention to those physical sensations so that they learn how to treat their body with kindness and keep it healthy, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I have this funny little tidbit I want to share with you. And you're gonna, my sister told me not to tell anybody this, but I'm gonna share it with the world. So I'm pretty sure if anybody watches these videos, then you know I don't have kids. And it occurred to me about a year ago that I would, whenever I go to the grocery store, I really like to get the little pre-made cake slices. And I just do. Okay, I admit it. It's not my biggest flaw, but it's one of them. And so they're just really good. And so I'll get those. But whenever I come home, I'm so hungry because I have this problem with waiting so long between meals. And so I come home, I'm so hungry, and all I want is the cake slice. I don't want to eat any of the food, the real food that I bought for dinner. And so I'll just eat the cake slice. And then it occurred to me, because I started trying to eat better, that if I actually eat dinner before I eat dessert, I don't eat nearly as much dessert. And so I told that to my sister. I said, you know what I realized? That if you eat your dinner before you eat dessert, it's way healthier. And she was like, everybody knows that. It's so basic. So yeah, everybody knew that but me. But I think it's because I'm not a parent, so I'm not having to say that to anybody.
Yeah, right. You're not thinking about what food's available, how are we presenting it, what time is it, when did we eat last? Like, you're just going through your day. You know, you have the food you purchased and you can eat. And you can eat cake. Like, you could eat cake first and then eat dinner. But the other thing that's so interesting is when you're so hungry like that, our bodies like switch into this mode of like, go get food, go get energy. And so carbohydrates, which is our energy source as glucose, really sound and taste good, because that's what our body needs. Like, it's sending us all the right signals. We need quick energy, go get some sugar. So, I mean, that's gonna happen to anybody at any age. If you've waited a long time, you're really hungry, that's what's going to sound good. And it's okay. Get a little of that in there, get that glucose going, and then you can say, okay, now I need to get some dinner prepared, and I need to have some protein, and I need to have some fruits or vegetables. But that's exactly what your body's saying, and you're responding to that. So
my body is being healthy in that moment.
Yeah, it's telling you need some energy, and that's quick. You eat that cake, it tastes good, and it's going to give you that little jolt of, oh, I feel good. That tasted good.
Right. Oh, it does that.
Yeah.
It does that really well.
So another way you could approach that is having some kind of snack that breaks up the time between the last time you ate and dinner, so that when you get home, you've got a little bit of a pause, like, okay, I'm getting hungry, but I'm not starving. My body isn't sending really intense signals to go get food. I can think about what I want.
I think that goes back to the first thing we chatted about, and just tuning out your body. I think that I get so caught up in my work that I am not paying attention to my body. Like, I go from not hungry to hungry in about 1.5 minutes.
Yeah. And there's so much of this, like, this is why I love working with therapists and psychologists, because there's so much work to be done to just pay attention to your body and identify what's going on. And if there is a lot of anxiety or stress, like, our body also says, okay, turn the appetite down. Let's not get food. We need to focus on other things. So, you know, if you're working with someone who is experiencing a lot of big emotions, sometimes it's hard to make food fit in, because you're not actually drawn to it, because all of your energy, if you will, is being spent on those big emotions.
Yeah.
So it really does go hand in hand.
Yeah. I feel like this is turning into I don't know what you call your sessions. It's not therapy session per se, but a dietitian session.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the children.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's not talk about ourselves and our food. Though that's my favorite thing, but.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So let's pretend again that I'm a mom who just brought in my kid, and we want to do some preventive steps. We want me to set up my child to be super successful with their eating. Anything else as far as all this goes? I mean, clearly I'm learning late in life, but we want this little fictional kid to learn across their childhood.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, and kind of along these, what we've been talking about, you know, there's a caregiver and an adult, and there's a child, and there's food to be prepared and served and eaten. So one of the kind of philosophies of a dietitian, I know you've got a book there by Ellen Satter, and so one of her philosophies, so it's Your Child's Weight, Helping Without Harming, and it's by a dietitian. Her name is Ellen Satter, and she is the guru in food relationships and feeding kids and feeding families. So she teaches and talks about the division of responsibility. So the DOR, division of responsibility. So the caregiver or parent is in charge of what, how, and when the food is presented. So as the caregiver, the parent gets to make the choice. Okay, it's lunchtime. Today we're having peanut butter sandwiches and applesauce and goldfish crackers. That's what's presented. It should be presented in a way that is appropriate for the child to consume, so that they're in a place that they can sit with the food. They're not distracted. It's in a form they can pick up and eat or use silverware, whatever is required. And then the child's job is to eat the food, and they get to choose if they eat the food or if they don't eat the food. Now that can be unsettling. You know, if you have parents whose concerns are where my child doesn't tend to eat very much and is on the lower side of growth, I feel like I should be concerned if they eat. Or you might have a parent that says, I have a child on the higher side of their growth range, and, you know, we need to be careful about that too. So setting up that kind of schedule and the expectation, like it's lunch, this is what we're having. It doesn't even have to be sit at the table. It can be we sit on the floor, or, you know, we turn off the TV and we sit here and do this while we have food, and then it's up to the child to eat. If the child doesn't eat, then there's going to be a snack later, but you have to wait until it's snack time to get something else to eat. So if it turns into just this, well, I don't want a peanut butter sandwich, I would rather have fruit snacks and a donut, that's not a choice, because that's not what's being offered. So we could have fruit snacks and a donut for a snack later, but this is what we're having right now.
So is it a situation, like let's say a parent hasn't been doing this process from like day one of the child's, you know, popping out, but they start this process when the child is 2 years old, then it's almost like a learning process for the child as well. So you would have like a behavioral extinction, which for everybody out there, that's where your child might tantrum and it might go up a little bit. But once they learn that this is how the scheduled meals go, it's almost like a sense of consistency. The tantruming ends.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that explanation of that. That is great. Yeah. Yeah, because if meals have been, you know, I made this, but you want this instead, okay, go get that. Or, you know, we're also doing 3 other things while we're supposed to be eating lunch, and so it's a really distracted time, and we might eat, we might not eat, or
and that kind of helps you cue into your body.
Yes.
Distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my grandson is 2.5, and I've figured out if there is stuff on the table that he can see, whether it's other food or cars or crayons, like he is so distracted by that. And so my job to feed him is to set up the environment that he can feel relaxed and focus on his food and not be distracted by the cool cars over on the other side of the table that he'd rather play with. So
yeah. So okay, I kind of, a lot of this is triggering for me situations families describe where maybe they have dinner expectations and they want their child to, not necessarily a preschool child, but maybe an early elementary age child, to sit through a dinner that's lasting 30 minutes, 40 minutes, around there. And it may or may not be necessarily a developmentally appropriate length of time for the child, but regardless, the child is expected to sit in the seat even if they're done eating. And I'm kind of wondering, like, it's almost like the conversation is expected, like that's, you know what I'm trying to say. It's like that setup. Like, what are your thoughts around that setup? Like, that kind of like that 1950s family style situation.
Yeah. You know, I think it could be super individualized, and it's going to depend on just the family culture. You know, if that's part of the family's connection time as we sit at the table and this is where we talk and share about our day and plan and talk about other things, like, I think that's appropriate. I think it's really difficult if food becomes associated with a negative, unpleasant experience. So, you know, if they're asked to sit there and it's just absolutely grueling, like maybe it's not developmentally appropriate for them to keep their attention at the table that long. I think that can be kind of a tough call.
That makes sense.
You know, I mean, what would it take 15 minutes maybe for a school-age child to finish a meal or eat what they're going to eat of a meal? And then they might be ready to move on to something else. They might just not have the attention span to sit there. But they, you know, they could be, you need to sit here this long. You know, we don't put our feet on the table. We, you know, take our turn in telling a story. We use our utensils appropriately. You know, those could be really appropriate things, I think, to work on at the table.
Sure.
Like, what do you think about that? Like, would you have a child sit just as part of family participation, or?
I mean, I like the idea of having a time where the family can come together. There's, you know, for various reasons, there is just good research that it helps build connection among the members of the family. It helps the child feel like they're a part of the family, things like that. It doesn't have to be dinner. It could be through other forms of family interaction. But if a family is choosing dinner to do that, then that sounds great. But I think for me, I've always kind of wondered, like, should the family, I think for many families, it's them teaching the value of respect to have the child wait until the other members are done eating. I particularly remember as a child that we didn't have to wait at the table, but Christmas, we had to wait until everybody was done eating before we could eat dessert, and it was horrible, and I hated it. And I mean, some adults eat really slow, really slow, and they talk a lot.
Right. There's lots of conversation. And when you're a kid and you're listening to that, you're like, you just move on. I'm ready to go play, or I want to have my dessert, and then I can go play. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that kind of brings me over to like the school lunch. Like, I feel like school lunches are typically around 20 minutes long.
If they get that amount of time. In some schools, I think, where they've got a lot of kids to kind of process through a cafeteria, it might even be less time available. And think of how distracting a school lunchroom can be. You know, there's all your friends you want to see and talk to, and there's lots of noises and smells and, you know, activity going on. It sometimes is hard to focus on, oh, this is the moment of the day where I need to eat my food to fuel my brain.
So what I've seen some children do is almost like this graze and play type of behavior. They just come back. And it makes me think about like the school, where it's like you need to shovel very quickly if you're going to eat enough. Or like even in the home environment, for those families that do want their children to sit at the table consistently for 30 minutes, I feel like it almost kind of is a bit different than the natural child behavior that I've seen with some kids, where they graze and play.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a great kind of just explanation of how kids do that. And I think like that's going to be probably more per child characteristics or per family culture and, you know, dynamic. I think it just really has to be age appropriate and what feels right in your family setting. But I think, you know, as far as just the nutrition and food, like keeping it open, that it's the child's responsibility. You've got this amount of time and we're going to sit at the table and it's your choice to eat what you want and have as much of what you want of each thing. And we're not going to label food good or bad. And, and even that is practiced at different degrees. Like I've worked with a lot of families, and just taking a bite of a vegetable is sometimes the expectation. In the Ellen Satter intuitive eating world, that might not be the expectation. It's there, you get to take it if you want. So I think there can be variabilities to all of these approaches.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I wonder too, so after hearing your thoughts on kind of the eating, what'd you call it, grazing and playing?
Graze and play. Graze and
play. Yeah, I love that. Maybe that's what lunch looks like, but then maybe dinner looks a little bit different. Maybe dinner's more, this is a meal, we sit down and we're focused on eating. And then the child gets some practice in both of those eating styles.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think of that?
I think some children could do that trade-off. I think for maybe a child with more severe ADHD, it's still going to be pretty hard. 30 minutes just sitting is pretty hard for a kid with severe hyperactive presentations of ADHD. So I think kind of going back to your original thought that it's so individualized, I feel like, yeah, that's probably where the ultimate recommendation would end up going. Just as a reminder to everybody, this isn't therapy for anyone. So if you end up having specific concerns about this, I think hearing us just talk out loud together, maybe it gives you ideas. But if you feel like your child is not getting enough nourishment, or their behavior is pretty far off typical where you want support, reach out to your pediatrician, get a referral to a dietitian or a behaviorist, and really see what a good recommendation is for your specific child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you just think of all the different family dynamics, if there are several kids at the table or there's lots of activity, like those meals are going to look completely different from maybe just one caregiver and one child eating a meal together. So even just that dynamic can make it different.
Right. So it sounds like then for this first fictional mom coming in here wanting to set it up, it's really about limiting the connection of unhealthy mindsets to food. Mm-hmm. That's the goal with healthy eating. Mm-hmm. And if I truly kind of think about it, I feel like that's what I've had to do in my adult years. As I've gotten healthier and healthier eating patterns, it's because I've said to myself, like, I've tried to push myself to eat healthier, like more basically vegetables.
Yeah, that's the healthy part of eting.
I've had to be like, which, to be completely fair, and maybe this kind of goes back to kids, so it kind of ties in acceptance and commitment therapy. Whenever I say to myself, okay, I don't like this vegetable, it's too bitter or something like that, and then I go and try it in a different version of how I had it from when I was a kid, I actually might like it better, because I've lived all over the country at this point. Everybody fixes their vegetables different. It turns out I just didn't like them, particularly how they were fixed. Yeah, when I was a kid. And so I actually love vegetables, but I had to accept that I was going to taste something bitter that I didn't like and commit to still trying new vegetables. And I feel like that's what a lot of parents are going for whenever their kids are young, whenever they say you have to take one bite of each vegetable, is they just want their kid to commit to it. Yeah. But I was going at it with more of a positive mindset, like I'm going to increase my nutrients, I'm going to do this for health. Kids don't have that. They're not saying that to themselves. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of go into a kid who has a very limited or even just a moderately limited range of foods they're eating, and a parent really is concerned just about the nutrient profile of the child and increasing it? Yeah.
And it, I mean, that's often the case, like there's maybe one child in the family who will eat 5 things, and then the sibling will eat everything, and they're just like complete opposites at the table. And I think it depends on, again, it's individualized. It depends on where that child is health-wise, if they're moving along their growth curve, or if they've, changed one way or the other, up or down on their growth curve, how you would approach this. If a child has 5 foods they'll eat, I think sometimes it's just best to provide enough nutrition with those 5 foods. So let's just be sure you're getting the calories you need to continue to grow with these 5 foods. So that's kind of the baseline. Like, let's just keep you out of malnutrition by giving you enough energy. And then I think you can start to just expand. So you might take a food that's liked and try it in a different form. And I know that can be difficult too. I work with a lot of kids that are like, I eat this kind of chicken nugget, and that's the only kind of chicken nugget I eat. But just offering, that variety in, well, we're also having this. This is also on your plate. So I'm going to give you a food I know you'll eat to get the energy, but we're also going to have some other things that other people in the family like, and it's going to be on your plate too. Like, it just takes that exposure. And I think kind of relaxing a little bit with the fear that there's going to be a nutrient deficiency because there isn't anything green in a child's diet. Yes, that's a valid concern, and it can happen, but that's where you're going to get involved with a medical provider and make sure growth is still happening, and those basics are covered.
Yeah, so the fear might be a little bit more pronounced than the actual real concern in more cases than not.
Yeah. And I mean, then you're working at that child's pace. Like, let them be exploratory, give them the opportunity to have a chance to try something and dislike something, and know that that's okay. But we're going to try it again. We're going to have it again at another meal, and it's going to be here, and we eat it. Like, it's also the modeling, of other people eating food. So when I was I was finishing my nutrition degree, and my son was actually 2. And when we went to the pediatrician for his checkup, I actually had recorded how many milligrams of iron he consumed, and I was sure he was deficient because I knew what those numbers were. And so my pediatrician let me know that it was absolutely fine that he only consumed a variety of foods that had iron in them, and his body would work to hold on to the iron it needed. And if there was a deficiency, we would be aware of that in other parameters, and that I could just kind of relax around that a little bit. So, I mean, I totally get that. Like, we're in charge of their food. That's a big responsibility.
I have to keep this human alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Are there any other aspects of the, are there any other aspects of the parent taking their responsibility, child taking their responsibility, that framework that you'd like to explore?
I mean, I think it can be a positive thing to have kids involved in some of the choices or variety of food that's available. So, I mean, still the guardian parent gets to be in charge of what is purchased and what's in the house, but I think that could be a nice conversation to have. Like, what other foods would you like to have for snack? And why is it that you want to try that? I mean, maybe it's just that they saw their friends eat that food, or saw a commercial on TV and they want to try it. And then just letting them explore that. Okay, well, we'll get that, and let's see if we like it, and if it goes well with the other food that we're having. Like, I think just letting kids be able to have a voice in some of that as they get older can be pretty important.
That kind of makes me think, one of the things that I often say, and I'm afraid you're going to reprimand me on this video.
I'll be gentle.
Cut it out.
I'll be gentle.
So one of the things that I often say to parents, because I like to use positive reinforcement for behavior plans, of course, and I talk about it so much. And so and very easy one to do is to incorporate choice into the child's life. And so I'll often say, a good way to do choice is that you allow the child to choose the vegetable that's going to appear in the dinner that night, or they can choose the dessert that's going to appear in the dinner that night, or where you're going to eat that night, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on me saying
I
that?
think that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good. Totally. Totally. And maybe it isn't even like the vegetable. Maybe they get to decide where you eat dinner. Like you said, or maybe we're going to eat it in the family room tonight and not in the dining, or we're going to eat outside, or, there's so many things. Tonight we're going to have an all finger food meal. We're just going to eat food with our fingers and no utensils.
I like that.
But it just really becomes more of that experience. Like, we're coming together, we're sharing food, and we like how that makes us feel. We get that community, we've fueled our body. Now we can go do other things, and we don't have to think about food for a few hours until it's time to have a snack or a meal again.
Right, right. So, the opposite side of that is that if the child doesn't complete their goal and their behavior plan, they wouldn't get to choose.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it could maybe be like, you get to choose where you sit at the table tonight, or.
Okay, so differential reinforcement. So it's like you can have like a choice that you kind of care about, or you can have a choice that you super care about.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still have choice. I like that because potentially taking away all choice related to a food-centric activity like dinner might, over time in a behavior plan, give that child some sort of negative relationship with food.
Absolutely.
I like
yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
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 Good. Oh, you're making me a better psychologist. Thank you.
And just thinking about these behavior thing, like, this is just like, tonight I'm just thinking, like, well, we get to eat spaghetti with our hands. Like, what would that be like? Like, just mix it up and make it totally crazy and fun.
I feel like you might want to get a plastic sheet before you.
Yeah. That might be an outdoor dinner for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So something else that occurs to me, just thinking about toddlers and preschoolers who might be more restrictive in the variety that they eat. I had read this somewhere that in other cultures, cultures that eat spicy foods, for instance, that they introduce spicy foods very young. And I feel like American kids are, they seem to be pretty averse to spicy foods, but it's not necessarily that that's biological, but because in other countries, the children are eating those spicy foods because it's modeled for them, that's what's presented for them. Basically everything you're saying, as far as teaching healthy eating, it's just that in those other cultures, it's a different set of foods. They happen to be spicy. So the kids, that's what they eat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that it's just like, this is what's here. This is the choice we have for the food tonight. You can eat it or not eat it. And if a child really has a taste preference for less spicy food, they're going to steer, so I think if you presented a meal that had like a strong flavor, like have something alongside that's going to be more bland, like have noodles or rice or bread that the child can eat, and they can also dabble and try the other things as well.
Is it like a biological thing that kids prefer more bland food?
That's a great question. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I would just totally suspect it's kind of culturally prescribed that way. And I think, like, I would say probably our tendency here in eating is that there's like a kids menu and an adult menu. And maybe in other countries, they don't do that. Like, I even know, like, families will say, well, the kids eat first and they're having chicken nuggets and broccoli. And then the parents or the adults sit down and they're having Thai food and a glass of wine. And so sometimes they're two separate eating events, which I think can be totally fine. But like, I think that's sometimes how we present food to kids. Like, this is your menu, this is our menu, when maybe there could be a blend or, yeah.
Right. And, that makes me think too, like, for instance, I mean, Thai food, I think that has vegetables in it, but just thinking about presenting healthy foods to children as choices, I feel like I might have just labeled vegetables as healthy food. I just broke one of your rules just to call myself out on it. But so for presenting vegetables though, so for that, I think I've kind of noticed with some parents that they might have this rule of always putting a vegetable on the kid's plate, but they don't necessarily put it on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they aren't eating dinner where their kid can see them eat dinner, it's a model that the vegetable isn't really required. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that, because the kids seem to be compliant whenever they're very young, but by the time they're about middle-aged, just before teenage years, what I notice is that the children eat exactly like the parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, so if you're thinking about your family and you say, okay, so we want to put more vegetables, whether we call them healthy or not, we want to put more vegetables into our eating.
Mm-hmm.
So the parent says, I mean, I can just imagine this scenario playing out. So they're like, okay, we're going to get broccoli. We're going to put broccoli on the kid's plate, but I don't really like broccoli. I'm not growing. I don't need that nutrition, so I'm not going to eat broccoli. Right. I think a better way to approach that would be, let's find a vegetable that we can all like and start with, even if it's corn, or because a lot of times parents are like, well, corn isn't that nutritious. It's still a vegetable. It's a plant. It has fiber. Let's start with corn and everybody gets to eat corn, or let's start with green beans and everybody gets to eat green beans. So you can kind of model that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have a limited vegetable repertoire of foods that I like, but I'm willing to eat them. I'm going to eat this vegetable with dinner because it makes me feel good when I eat it, or it's part of a balanced meal.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Because then it's more about, again, like you're living a life that is about feeling good and healthy, but you're not depriving yourself. That meal doesn't become a gross meal where you don't feel satisfied, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're still creating meals that are appealing to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So macaroni and cheese for the entree, and you can throw a fruit or vegetable on the side, and that is, that's probably a really palatable meal for a young person, and there's plenty of good nutrition in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can work on introducing some of those fruits and vegetables with something that's very acceptable.
Yeah.
Side.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool.
This has been fun. I like this.
Yeah, it's really good. It's even more conversational than most of my my expert interviews have been. And you guys can probably tell, but Michelle and I hang out sometimes. So
I know. I don't know how it could not feel conversational between us. So that's what you get.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any area where a parent might still have a question. I do think that the one thing, we've already hit on it, but I feel like parents, whenever we talk about, the parent's responsibility is to offer the food, the child can eat it or not eat it. And we did talk about how, okay, well, there's going to be tantruming at first. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But because of the consistency of the parent offering a specific food, not giving multiple options to replace that, and then if the child chooses not to eat over time, they start to learn they are going to eat the food that's presented, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like for a lot of parents, there's an anxiety there that at some point overwhelms their skill set in doing that kind of approach. I'm wondering what you've utilized perhaps in your own practice to support those parents and feeling comfortable in doing that. Like how many days can a kid go without eating?
Yeah, I know, right. I remember there was one family that I worked on this with, and it was like, just present the food and let the kid eat. And so a couple days later, I get a phone call and they're like, well, we had hot dogs for dinner. And so we had the hot dogs and the buns, and everybody kind of picked up their own. They said, and our daughter chose to eat like 8 hot dog buns and no hot dog. And is that normal? And it's like, yeah. And again, it's because it's so individualized, like, where is that child from a medical perspective? Like if we've got a child who's in a fragile state that we don't want them going several hours without nutrition, like there's going to be a different version of this.
Okay.
But I think kids start to pick up, oh, I actually do feel bad. And you can point things out like, look at how long you played outside after having all that good food you had for lunch, or fueling your body with all that lunch. Or look at how you solved that problem with this because you had that snack this afternoon, and your brain is working really well today. And, so you can reinforce that way. It's not comfortable to be hungry. And so I think kids are going to turn to well, this is the food I get, setting that boundary, I better learn to eat it. But I think it's also important to present food that a child can eat and will eat. So even if it's macaroni and cheese every meal and you're putting something on the side for them to try in addition, I think it can be that. But there should be something that's a favorite of the child so they get something to eat.
Okay. I like that. So if you're trying to, start to change their diet habits, let's say they only eat macaroni and cheese, and normally it would be a full bowl of macaroni and cheese. You might start only presenting their food on a plate so that you can start putting other options on there as well.
Fabulous idea. Yes.
Yeah. And then their portion of macaroni and cheese would start to decrease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about your child starving. That's going to decrease the parent's anxiety. I mean, we're talking about a typically developing child here. We're not talking about special circumstances. Again, people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Your child's pediatrician if you have a special circumstance. But I think really the key that we're talking about right now is reducing parent anxiety that oftentimes leads them to go off of a plan before it's had time to work, because we all know that those child tantrums during an extinction burst can get severe, really, really severe. And one of the things that I do in the therapy world is I find ways to give reinforcement in order to reduce the severity of the extinction burst. So all of that intense tantruming for their preferred food, exactly what you just said, having the preferred food as one portion rather than the full meal, that would be a way to decrease the extinction burst or the tantrum, so that the parent can make it through the full duration of that plan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. I was even thinking too, like, would it be possible over time to then maybe start doing like macaroni and cheese every other meal and spacing it out a little bit once the child starts maybe having one or two other preferred foods, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it would be a very slow plan.
Mm-hmm.
That means you, as a parent, you have to have persistence.
Yeah, and it's patience and persistence. Yeah.
You might be sticking to this for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, but if your child's only eaten macaroni and cheese for the past 5 years, maybe that's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's just increasing variety,
right?
So there's a better nutrition profile, basically.
Right.
They're still getting energy. They're getting enough calories to grow and develop, but they're getting some variety that's going to increase their nutrition profile with vitamins and minerals.
Okay, cool.
And enjoyment, like we enjoy a different palette and a variety of food. So food becomes more enjoyable if you've got different tastes and textures and temperatures. And so it's tapping into that for a child.
Speaking of textures and whatnot.
I know after I said that, I'm like, not every kid loves texture.
So for those children who absolutely refuse to try new food or an entire group of foods, what are your thoughts?
I think sometimes, it kind of depends on the severity, but sometimes working with a more or a bigger team, like I've worked a lot with occupational therapists and speech therapists in a pediatric role, and they can work on just like some of that exposure. If you're putting food in front of a child and the reaction is aversion and gagging and they're just absolutely not able to eat it, like I think that would be an appropriate point to pull in a different kind of a therapeutic approach.
Yeah, Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe starting with a food that's only, or at the most mildly aversive end,
Yes.
you can
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
slowly working into more and more aversive foods.
Right. And I mean, that takes planning and, and then they've got multiple kids in a family and maybe you're traveling or you have different care providers. Like it's hard to kind of stick to this. So maybe finding a meal or like, at lunchtime is the time when we offer something different because that's the most consistent meal of the day, or dinner's the time when we do it because that's the most consistent meal of the day.
Right, right. I think that's why prevention is so much easier than treatment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Okay, cool. Is there any area that you've thought of that you'd like to hit on? I feel like you've answered all my questions.
No, I just think, really learning not to label food. Like that's hard to do because that's how we've been taught about food is this food is good for you, this food is bad for you. But to learn to change that language for kids so they can approach food more neutrally, I think it just sets them up to be more accepting. It certainly is going to help them be less judgmental of themselves and when they choose food, because it's so easy to say, well, I'm a bad person because I ate that food that has been labeled bad. So I think just really learning different language around that. And that takes time also.
Right, right, for sure. Thank you for being here, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. I love being called in as an expert. That's great.
Yeah, for sure you are, for sure. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, cool. Everybody, you can go to enildaclinic.com and sign up for my email list where you can get these expert chats in your email once a week, every week. As you can see, just from my conversation with Michelle, they're amazing. I'm talking to people who know tons and tons of stuff. Michelle, where can people find you if they want to work with you more?
Yes, they can just go to my website at michellewinebendernutrition.com and all of my contact info is there.
Awesome. And I'll put the link down below in the description for the video so you can find the link there. All
Yeah.
right, everybody.
Leslie, thank you for doing these too. This is a great resource.
Thank you.
Really to send
Thank you.
parents to. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, my sister said to me the other day, she was looking through the videos and she goes, "You give all of this away for free?" And I was like, "I sure do. I sure do."
Yeah.
I love doing the videos. I really do. Not to mention I learned so much from it. So I feel like it makes my clinical practice a lot better.
That's great. Yeah.
All right. Have a good week, everybody. Bye.